Now, like we were saying before off camera, we spoke together a couple times before through the internet. Met you and seen everything you were doing via Bob Kendrick, Negro League Baseball Museum out in Kansas City. And great job, man. Great on everything you've been doing.
Well, thanks. It's an important subject that we have. And with the Hall of Fame announcement coming up here and John Donaldson actually getting on that ballot, it's important that we fill in what our responsibility is to let people know who he was and how significant and important he was.
Like I said, once again, great job that you've been doing. So let's jump into it. I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. You got some important dates coming up, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. I don't want to jump ahead of myself. So let's start with this. I'm going to give you two numbers, actually three numbers, and these are amazingly impressive. 413, 161, and 737. Now, that's all the research I did. 413 wins on 161 losses, career record, 737 winning percentage, correct?
That is correct, except we are now at 422 wins.
Wow. Well, so the process of what I was looking at too, and how everything goes into that. So you basically, now you have a team with you, right? That goes into everything, does all the research. I mean, you guys are just scouring old newspapers, scouring anything that you guys get your hands on?
Yeah, what happens is we have identified dates that John Donaldson played in. He played for over 33 seasons, and he played in over 744 cities in North America, 26 states, 6 Canadian provinces, right? He's all over the place.
Oh, my goodness.
And so what was needed to happen was I pretty much assigned people opportunities to go find where he was. They'll send me back game accounts from primary sources, newspapers, and we compile and tabulate all that stuff to try and figure out and stop this thing that's called John Donaldson Who. This idea that people do not know who John Donaldson is, albeit he was so very important to the game of baseball. People just need to start to recognize him again, because way back 100 years ago, everybody in America knew who John Donaldson was.
Yeah, like famous, everyone. Really, when you do the research, I read a lot of stuff that you put out and everything like that. He really was he really was super. I guess you would really call it the first superstar, one of the first superstars really in baseball and pop culture back then and everything, huh?
That's true. Black baseball at the time, before the Negro League started, and John Donaldson played a lot of his games before the Negro Leagues began, really needed a black star. They needed somebody who could cross over and defeat Jim Crow to be able to prove that black baseball players could be stars that crossed over to white audiences. And John Donaldson was the first black superstar.
So this is one thing that I never would have even thought. Over 1,800 bats and a 334 average. So what he played center field, right field, left field. Could you indulge in that a little bit?
Yeah, John Donaldson was a 5-tool player. He could play when he wasn't pitching, and he made great strides in the art of pitching. He was playing every day because barnstorming teams could only carry a certain number of players. The pot could only be split up so many ways. John Donaldson was playing center field every day he wasn't pitching. And so he was playing 7 days a week, pitching 3-4 times a week, playing for crowds and splitting the pot, right? They'd take the winner took a 60% of the gate and the losers got 40% of the gate, which was still a huge amount of money because when John Donaldson was in your town, everybody came. And thousands and thousands of people would show up where there was normally only 300-400 people. And that's an important thing to understand is John Donaldson was an exiled major leaguer. Everybody knew he should play in the major leagues. Everybody also understood the gentleman's agreement and the color barrier that existed in the major leagues. So this was their opportunity to go see somebody who everybody universally accepted as being major league quality baseball player right here in our hometowns.
Now, Mr. Pete, I want to backtrack real quick. I know, we know what the term is, but if you could you answer for me what barnstorming, what the actual term is, please?
Sure. Think of a traveling circus, right? They go from town to town, put up their circus tent, play their shows, walk out the elephants, right? The lions and tigers or whatever. And and then they'd pick it all up and they'd go to the next town, or they'd go down the way some other time. And that's what baseball teams did back in those days, especially black baseball players, because there wasn't organized leagues to play in. Of course, in the major metropolitan areas, there were large black populations, they had all black baseball teams, and they often played against each other and had little independent leagues, often associated with some kind of industry. If it was a mining industry or a logging industry, they would have black baseball teams that were associated with industries, right? You'd have a bunch of African-American guys who were on your payroll, and on the weekends they'd play baseball games that were sponsored by industry organizations. But barnstorming teams, they traveled around. And what John Donaldson did was he pioneered the art of barnstorming, right? Going from town to town. He was often the only black person on the team, right? He played on a team called the All Nations team, and they are exactly what their name describes. They had people of different origins, playing all different positions. And this was a novelty because people at that time thought everything should be segregated, thought everything should be separate. They thought that it was impossible for a baseball team, and something that was team orientated so much as baseball is, that they could not even exist and coexist together, much less play the national game. And what John Donaldson and his teams were doing were dispelling these myths and really talking about the promise of America, which was the melting pot, which was everybody getting along and understanding and living and playing together. And that was really a novel concept at its time. And we're talking about the years from about 1908 to 1920 was when this All Nations team was going. They started in 1911, right, and moved all the way through the 19 teens, through the World War I years, into the flu pandemic years, right? The All Nations team were traveling around all over the place, and they play about 100, 150 games a year, all in different cities, right? Imagine you were 150 trying to fill out a 150 game schedule, and you never had a home game.
Right. Always on the move too, because the travel and everything was a lot different than it is compared to today and everything.
Most definitely. I'm sure you know this, but the average speed of a locomotive steam train in 1910 was 35 miles an hour. So,
and just to think about the durability and everything like that, to get up, to do that, to go put the actual ballpark up, to take it down, to go around and go and everything like that. It was interesting. I had a conversation with Dan Walsh, who is the he operates with the Shoeless Joe Museum, and after Joe was pushed out and pushed away, he did the same thing. And it's crazy because, Donaldson's name, Jackson's name, it's like the huge draw. It's like the big show that's coming to town, the big rock star that's coming to town.
Right. Babe Ruth is famous for taking Babe Ruth's team on the road, battling the commissioner's office for how much money that was worth. And major leaguers would barnstorm as well.
Yeah, that's a great thing. And I thank you for breaking that all the way down. And that's awesome. Now, Mr. Donaldson did a lot of things around the game. So 1920 was an actual interesting date that you brought up and everything. He coined the team's name. He coined one of the famous, if not the most famous team from the Negro Leagues. Can you talk about that as well? Also as a player, also as a manager for them as well, too?
Yes, John Donaldson played for the team called the All Nations, like I talked about before. That was owned by a guy named J.L. Wilkinson, who's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He was in the Baseball Hall of Fame for many reasons, but one of the reasons was he had this integrated baseball team way before anybody had thought integration could possibly happen, right? This All Nations team, and John Donaldson's the star, and they travel all over, like I said, right? And then as the Negro National League approaches, right, they're starting to put together teams from major cities. Chicago, Kansas City, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Detroit, the brand new Negro National League, the first league of its kind that really was sustained. It went for many, many years after that. And so they were building a franchise in Kansas City, and J.L. Wilkinson built the Kansas City Monarchs around John Donaldson and his star power. That team went on to become the most famous franchise in Negro League history. And John Donaldson is credited with suggesting the name Monarchs. And a little known fact is it's not the butterfly, and it's not the crown that goes on your head. A monarch was a type of beef cow. It was a type of steer that was slaughtered for steaks, right? I mean, this was the best kind of beef that America had at that time. The Monarchs was a type of beef cattle.
There we go. Now I'm kind of hungry. I know when I've been in Kansas City, man, they had some great.
I could go for that too, right? What is Kansas City famous for, right?
Burns,
barbecue or a steak.
Right. Absolutely. I'm gonna take the barbecue. I'm jumping out there, but I do want you to clarify this for me, please. He had over 150 games with no stats, though, correct? Or probably possibly more. I should let you answer that.
Yeah, we have 200 games that John Donaldson's team played in and won that has no primary source pitcher of record. Right. So they would just have a list in the team lost today to the All Nations team, for instance. The score was 10-1.
But that's not to cut you off. I'm sorry, but that's not necessarily to say when you said 200, that's not necessarily his games. That's just saying overall games, correct?
Overall games, right? We have for John Donaldson, we have about 2,500 games that we found so far in all these different places. Right. But yeah, these are games. We know of 719 different pitching appearances that he had. That means that he was primary sourced somewhere to say John Donaldson played in this game, right? He pitched in this game. And that is an official pitching appearance. We're not making any of these things up. We add and tabulate everything that is an absolute fact. And what remains is 150 games of his 719. There's 159, something like that, right, where there's no published strikeout total, right? So he has 5,181 strikeouts attributed to his career right now, right? There's almost 160 games where no strikeout record was published. Right. And so his 5,000, the most strikeouts, documented strikeouts of any Negro League or black pitcher or segregated pitcher in the history of baseball. John Donaldson is that guy, but his numbers are deflated because there's a whole lot of reporting that didn't happen in terms of, well, think about it. He comes to your town, right? He strikes out a bunch of guys. You guys get pounded by the All Nations team, right? And the newspaper didn't necessarily want to say their local guys got just beat up by a black person. That was something that they didn't want to talk about. And so there's bias all over these numbers. That is a part of John Donaldson's legacy. We've been able to assemble, 5,181 strikeouts, right? And the numbers keep going up. We found 2 more last week, right? It's an important thing to understand that this is still also an emerging blueprint for how to resurrect somebody's baseball career when it's spread out all over. And that can be done for any black player that was associated with the Negro Leagues, right? Or typically is associated with the Negro Leagues. We can go and use our blueprint that we did for John Donaldson, and we can put all those numbers together for any black baseball player that there was. Because if you think about it, these guys weren't only playing on Sundays. They were playing there 7 days a week. Our model shows and proves that. And we can find numbers for everybody because we've found a way to network with people in order to get primary source data.
Great job, Mr. Pete, spearheading that. You're doing a fantastic job. And
it's a lifelong endeavor, right? I'm into my 21st year of daily searching for John Donaldson. I mean, this stuff isn't just right where you think it is. You got to go out and look harder. You got to enlist people who can understand collections, understand libraries, understand what survived around the United States of America. And we have over 1,000 contributors to our effort. And it's a hugely important part of it. I'm one of the people who can help direct people in the right direction. But if you look out your window and there's a place where John Donaldson is known to have played, I can enlist you to go get that. It'll take you a couple of minutes to take a snapshot on your iPhone, right? And send it into us. And we can add those totals to John Donaldson's legendary baseball career. And that is what we can do as individuals. And I need to encourage as many people who want to take on other black baseball players to do the exact thing, because history has taught us that they didn't write about black players in the newspaper. Well, that's just not true. We have 8,000 newspaper references for the career of John Donaldson. I mean, that's a lot of newspaper coverage. Now, granted, he was the most famous person that there was in terms of that sort of mold, but they wrote about people all the time. It's just a matter of finding those primary sources, and we know how to do that.
Yeah, the research. Now, 14 no-hitters?
That's what we have so far, yes.
14. Nolan had 7. That's amazing. 86 shutouts.
You're probably right. I don't know the exact shutout number.
Right. We got 296 complete games, 1.37 ERA career.
That's approximately right.
Roughly right there.
Right. I mean, those numbers are what they are. We're playing against people who are in different cities all over the United States. We can discount those as not being major leaguers, but you also have to understand there's very few major leaguers. And so there's this whole effort of people, and God bless them, but they're trying to have major league equivalency, and it just is something that is not possible to comprehend.
Still, I mean, no matter what anyone would say, the numbers and the way of the travel and the game and everything like that is just amazing. And when you read and just see, it's just amazing career. Let me ask you this. So you did give us a different, the city, like, a rough estimate of how many cities that he really traveled. Like, yep. How many different teams did he play for in total?
The last time I checked, it was over 30. And these go from one time we hired him on a Sunday to draw a huge crowd and pay for our baseball season, which is what happened.
And that's what I was going at. So basically, and a lot of people like, baseball back then, there was a lot of hired guns. There were a lot of people that would come in, just like you said, to bring in and bring the crowds in and bring the excitement in. And it was like we were talking about
there's this popular misconception that it originated with Satchel Paige, and it's just not true. Right. It originated with John Donaldson being the headlining Negro League baseball player, right, coming to your town, exiled major leaguer. That's what happened. People just remember Satchel Paige because of the time he lived in.
Now, let me ask you another question too, because you brought it to a question I was going to bring to you as well. Sure. Now, much of Satchel's, style, his, as we could say, swag, business, that all came from Mr. Donaldson, correct? I mean, you know what I mean? He was groomed.
Yeah. He certainly taught Satchel Paige the way to run a barnstorming franchise, right? I mean, and he needed a headliner, need somebody to draw the crowd. Every city that they traveled through doesn't mean that city is going to be a lucrative city. And what John Donaldson was able to do and pass on to Satchel Paige and many others was identify that this town was worth more money than this town, and we're going to play here and not there, and we're going to move around and then John Donaldson starts with train travel, right? And then cars come and they start moving around in rickety old cars. The difference between travel on the train versus travel over cars and on the roads of the United States of America was a huge change. It was easier, I guess, technically to go in a car. You certainly had more control over time to leave and et cetera, but it all originated with the train travel, and that sort of well-worn route was patted down by John Donaldson, and Satchel Paige capitalized on it decades later.
I mean, that way more than a ball player, way more. And I'm glad, like I said before, that you got your hands on this, helping and doing everything to bring this to light. So that's amazing, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing is to understand is, look, I can tell you about statistics all day long. I mean, they're just thousands and thousands of them laying around in boxes behind me, right? I mean, that's right. But John Donaldson's a man. John Donaldson is doing something at a time in segregated America that no one's doing. And he's proving one stop at a time that it is possible for an African-American man to be a star in the United States. And that had never been done before. There had been lots of people who tried to do that, but they found a way, and maybe the atmosphere was better depending on where they went to. There's lots of different factors for that, but John Donaldson was a proven moneymaker, and that's what his legacy says, and we know that. And our job now is to tell everybody, right? The Hall of Fame announcement comes out, and you got a bunch of names that people probably don't even know. Uh-huh. They're 100 years old, right? We're here to tell you what John Donaldson did, how he did that, and tell you about the man himself. Integration in America, integration in baseball does not happen without John Donaldson. I mean, look over my shoulder here. We got John Donaldson standing in the middle of a bunch of white guys, right? This is 1926. This is 20 years before Jackie Robinson does it in the Brooklyn Dodgers uniform, right? Jackie Robinson can't do that without these things happening first. And John Donaldson was the innovator of that. And that's what his legacy. And that's why I believe he's a baseball Hall of Famer.
Speaking of that, got a shot coming up. Got a shot coming up, doesn't he? December 5th. 2021.
Yeah, and it's a culmination of the work that we've been able to do, right? We've really brought this guy's legacy. It started in 2003. His unmarked grave was identified in Chicago, and we got a gravestone put on it as a part of the Negro League Baseball Grave Marker Project. He was in the inaugural class of that, and we put a gravestone on him. And I'm standing down there. I have some stats of John Donaldson. I know a little bit about his career. I'm standing around with some of the greatest Negro League historians that there are at that time. And I said, does anybody really know who the guy is that we're doing this for? And they all kind of said, well, no. I mean, we see that he's in certain lists and he's in books like Only the Ball Was White by Robert Peterson, right? A Sentinel Negro League Baseball book. If you have to get one, get that one. It was printed in 1969, but it talks about the greats of the game. And John Donaldson has almost a full chapter dedicated to him. And people wondered why. They just couldn't put all the information together. They thought it was impossible to find all this stuff. And back then it probably was. When Satchel Paige went in the Hall of Fame in 1971, people in Minnesota thought that the next person in there should be John Donaldson. And that was a big thing around here. Yet nobody could ever put together the statistics or figure out where he was or compile his career because it was spread out all over the United States. In 1970, you would have had to drive to the middle of Nebraska and follow his roots for 33 years to figure out which towns he played in and try and find newspapers for all that in order to do that. But in the modern age today, I can email somebody that wasn't available to people in 1960, in 1960s and 1970s, right? We can do that now, and John Donaldson's legacy deserves that. And so John Donaldson is theoretically coming out of nowhere, but we know all about him. And what my job is to tell you and tell your audience that we know who John Donaldson is. He's not some mythical figure anymore. He's on all-time Negro League lists, right? People put out lists all the time, and they've been doing that for a century about who the greatest Negro League baseball players are. 2019, the Negro League Baseball Museum was getting ready to celebrate the centennial year, and John Donaldson's named one of 32 players on the all-time Negro League's baseball centennial team, right? And so we make these lists all the time, and John Donaldson's on these lists for 11 consecutive decades. It isn't just me telling you about him. They've been talking about him for 110 years and putting him on these lists of who are the greatest Negro League players of all time. His name's on there. It just took somebody in the modern age to be able to get all these things together and start telling people of the significance. Now the Hall of Fame has recognized him by putting him on the ballot, and it gives us a chance to tell his story again, because it's really the story of each one of us and how we got here. And it's really an important story today as much as it was 100 years ago.
Fantastic. 1952. He was also named on the first team for the Pitt Courier poll, right? Of the greatest black baseball players as well, correct?
That's right. He's one of 5 pitchers named on that, and he's the only pitcher remaining that is not in the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's a significant poll. It was taken by, they polled actual players who had seen him and journalists from that time period. He gets great support on that because everybody knew he was great, and that testament lives on. It just took a bunch of people to figure that out, and so we find that out, right? He's there's 13. I think there's 13 players on that poll on the first team, and like 12 of them are in the Hall of Fame. And John Donaldson's a single solitary name that everybody kind of went, well, we don't really know who that is. And now we do.
Great testament to his character too. I read somewhere earlier this week that a lot of people, loved his mother so much. A lot of people were trying to convince him. I don't know if this is true. Maybe you can enlighten me. Try to convince him to go to Cuba, basically saying that we could try to get you to the major leagues. That way you just could never go back to your family or anything like that again.
That's correct. And that was a loophole in the color barrier, right? There were teams that were, the Philadelphia A's had a couple Cubans on their team in the mid-19 teens. It was an opportunity to have somebody who had darker skin still play in the major leagues because they were Cubans. They weren't considered African Americans because that would never happen.
Right.
And so there was this scheme put out that he was to go to Cuba and start speaking Spanish. He was going to come back and join probably was the New York Giants, and pitched right next to Christy Mathewson, for heaven's sakes, and become a major leaguer. And he said, no, I was born black, I was born American, and that's the way it's going to be. And this is his character of this guy. You cannot be a groundbreaking, barnstorming baseball player unless you're very certain of who you are, and you're very certain and have a moral identity that allows you to go through the Jim Crow laws that are all over the United States. Segregation was a huge problem for African Americans in this country. And John Donaldson somehow gets through that line and becomes very popular because of his athletic ability, but not only that, because of his personality and who he was. He was able to really cross over when no one was able to do that.
Yeah, and if anyone that follows, your website or your Twitter or anything like that can see just the numerous accounts that you put out, things that you guys found, very well high spoken of and everything like that.
Thank you. Well, there's 8,000 newspaper articles, and that's not just
Yeah.
a number we pulled out, right? I'm not telling you what people, speculated, right? Satchel Paige said, I struck out, or I won 2,000 games and I struck out 10,000 guys. Well, that's even round numbers. He might have been speculating about that. I can tell you exactly how many John Donaldson did and have, and those numbers continue to rise. We're going to find more. There's lots more out there. And every time that we have a conversation with somebody like this, somebody's going to be able to go out and find out more stuff. The great part about what the Donaldson Network does is we put a list of stuff up there we don't know. We have references for these games. We've just never seen any accounts for them. And there's hundreds of them. There's so much room to fill in this puzzle. People just need to get excited about that and understand that they can really help solidify a legacy of somebody that America has really forgotten.
Yeah, and like you said, basically just getting the trade routes open and showing people how to do it, and giving the future generations the groundwork. Let's say the groundwork. Some more things that I found that are completely amazing. Yeah. He had 2 or more 30 strikeout games. This is 11 games with 25 or more strikeouts. 203 double-digit strikeout games. What was it? Okay, so let's just say he's going from Nebraska. He gets in Nebraska. The next game's in Sioux Falls. He's just resting that game when he's driving. Right when he gets there, he's throwing again?
Well, John Donaldson was like baseball players was very, very regimented. Yeah. He was in excellent physical condition. One of the great parts that we know about his career was, he plays in 744 different places. He took a walk around every morning. He woke up at dawn every morning. He had a pre-breakfast morning walk through every city he ever went to, right? This was his routine. This was his rituals, right? So he got a glimpse and a view of America like no one else had. Because he was going to all these places, he was able to see America exactly how it was. But yeah, he's traveling around. He is extremely famous. He is moreover, getting along with people. He'd go into your town, strike out 25 guys, and you'd gladly invite him back because the grandstand was full and the field was surrounded by people, and everybody made money when John Donaldson was around. So he was really that drawing card personality that could guarantee a profit. And that's what sustained baseball in all these areas. You could get one game with John Donaldson sometime late in the year and operate at a loss the entire season, and then you'd have one game with him, and now you're all in the black again, and you can play baseball here again next year. And you got to understand that's a part of the game. Small towns and baseball organizations struggle with money all the time. This sustained baseball in the United States of America, in the hinterlands of America, because John Donaldson came to your town one time each year, and you could all of a sudden make a lot of money. And it wasn't just the promoters of the game. It was the hotels, the restaurants, the guys selling hot dogs, the ice cream people, right? All of the different people were making money whenever he came around. And that's a key understanding of the economics of baseball. And John Donaldson provided that kind of sure thing for everybody. And he was a black player as well, which makes it even more astonishing at that time.
Yeah, I was going to say, because like you said, he is more like a visionary, like just seeing everything and putting it together and everything. Now, let me ask you, you've been very descriptive. You've been very informational. You've been very helpful so far along our journey. You also helped get a statue erected.
Yes. Correct? Yes. In 2020, everybody remembers last year, all these statues are getting torn down around the United States. All these perceived statues of hate, right? In his hometown of Glasgow, Missouri, north central Missouri, we put up a larger-than-life statue and dedicated John Donaldson statue and field in his name in his hometown. So we're raising a statue of a Black person in the South when all these people are getting torn down all over the United States for what they stood for in their time. This is a monumental thing that we were able to accomplish. It gained some recognition for that, but it's a stark reality that he's going up, and all these terrible or perceived terrible people are coming down. John Donaldson is rising out of this incredible tumultuous past that he had, and people are starting to realize how really influential he was. We're able to tell you that, and that's extremely gratifying. And forever and ever, there will be a statue of John Donaldson in his hometown, and people will know and really have that shadow of that statue to teach them about who John Donaldson was and what it was like to be American, and what it was like to be a visionary in order to see the promise of what America could be.
Let me ask you this. Let's say December 5th. Everything goes right. Everything goes the way, let me say this, the way that it should go. Does Mr. Pete shift gears? Does he go from, okay, I've done this, vidi vidi veci, we came, we saw, we conquered. Now we're going to go to another ball player, human being that needs this type of recognition, that needs the same, or is it we're going to continue to go cementing?
Well, I think the blueprint is there. Mm-hmm. We have a way of doing this. If you want to talk about any other player, we can figure out how to do that. I can help you along and help you understand how to make strides to be able to figure out where these guys were. It's important that we took a huge player. I mean, 33 seasons is a huge endeavor, right? At one time I had a spiral, a D-ring binder, right? And it had literally 33 years of a calendar in there. I mean, it's this thick, right? And we just penciled in everywhere we knew John Donaldson was on a specific date and filled in the calendar. It still has plenty of holes in it. There's plenty of opportunities to figure out where he was and what he did. And we'll continue to do that because it's important that we show that there is still advancement to be made. The story is changing, but if December 5th and everything goes as you say, we're going to keep working on him. I just need people to understand that there's other opportunities for others to do exactly that. But if that works out that way, we're going to be busy telling people who he was. That's really our job, is to take John Donaldson who and get rid of it. Take the blank piece of paper and fill it in. That's a hard step. But I tell you what, the important thing to me is if December 5th happens, it's very important that we recognize John Donaldson as a baseball player. You can call him a Negro Leagues baseball player if you want to. That's been traditionally what people say. But what I really want to start talking to people about is he was a baseball player, not just a Black baseball player, because oftentimes that means something lesser than. He was as good as anybody, any era, any time. We need to start recognizing him the way we would recognize anybody today. You don't call an African-American, you don't call Mookie Betts a Black baseball player. You don't. You call him a major leaguer. You call him a baseball player. And that's what we really need to start looking at in terms of what John Donaldson was. All of us together recognize that John Donaldson was a ball player, not some sort of lesser than Negro League baseball player. He was a ball player that all of us can be proud of and should be. And when that day happens, this effort will be over.
Good for you, man. Great for you and everyone involved, and great for a lot of people, they always say, oh, just listen to the message. It's not the carrier of the message. Well, the message is great, and the message carrier, you're doing a great job, sir.
Well, thank you. It's an endeavor, right? One day, I don't know how many years ago, probably 15 years ago, I'm sitting in my basement going over John Donaldson games, right? We're trying to get all this stuff compiled, figure out primary sources, and it's a lot of column page numbers and all kinds of data, right? And I'm sitting there and I realize this is one of the greatest baseball players in the history of baseball, and he's right here. And I'm the only one who knows. How can we just sit here and let it be? The box that John Donaldson, right behind me, is John Donaldson. In this box right here is his Missouri Sports Hall of Fame plaque. Why is it in my basement? All this data, all this stuff is in my basement in suburban Minneapolis. Why? This is one of the greatest players ever. it doesn't belong here. It belongs somewhere where people can see it. It belongs somewhere where people can hear and understand and be moved by this story the way I have been and millions of other people have. It's absolutely ridiculous to me that one of the greatest baseball players in the sport in its long history, one of the greatest players ever, is in my basement. And how did it get here? Well, there's a lot of reasons how it got here. But the important thing to understand is it isn't going to be here forever. We're going to take it out of here and start showing people and start exposing people to the story of how great and who John Donaldson was. It's just absolutely impossible that it's going to stay here. It can't. It is way too big and way too interesting a story for people to just gloss over as that's just some sort of Negro League baseball player and that loud guy from Minneapolis is telling us all about him. That's just ridiculous. This is one of the greatest players ever. If Lou Gehrig's career was laying in my basement, do you think that would ever happen? I don't think so. It's important to know that we are going to bring him out of here. We're going to raise him up just like we raised his statue. Right? Look, his statue, the eyes of his statue look out, and up a hill is the plantation house that was once had slaves. Now think about that. There's a slave owner sitting on the porch looking out over his plantation, right? And now there's a baseball field there with a statue of a black man in it. That is what we're doing, and that is how we're changing America.
Great for you, man. So just give me this one. December 6th.
Look, you can send me a message on December 6th. You can send me a message on December 7th. You can send me a message on December 8th, et cetera, et cetera. It's maybe not Christmas.
I know.
Right? But I'll talk to you about John Donaldson whenever you want to. It just so happens that the Hall of Fame is honoring him by putting him on this ballot, and they're really going to judge his legacy, that we got to have a chance to talk about this, but we should talk about it every day of the year.
You're right. You're right. Now, we appreciate your time. Once again, like I said, I'm going to end it with this. I see it on you right now. I have over 350 jerseys, Mitchell and S, Ebbets Field. I have, whatever, game used, born athletic, whatever. The story, the history, the time, the stitch, the fabric, that's what means everything to me. And I see what you're wearing right now. So my question that I ask everyone is, why is it your favorite, and what's it mean to you?
The story of the John Donaldson's All-Stars jersey, right? He had his own team started in 1930. Had traveled around the United States with a bunch of African-American guys and had John Donaldson's All-Stars, right? This wasn't a new concept. Other great players had. Satchel Paige had his All-Stars. Jackie Robinson had his. Roy Campanella had his. I mean, that's not new. But John Donaldson proved that they could make money doing that. I helped the Minnesota Twins. The St. Paul Colored Gophers were a local team who won the 1907 Negro League Championship, or Negro Championship. They were trying to do a tribute day several years ago, 15 years ago now, and I helped them find a logo for the Colored Gophers. And I told them the only thing I want is a uniform. So they gave me a 1909 St. Paul Colored Gophers jersey. It was wonderful. And it was made by this company in Vernon, California. They made uniforms for major leaguers. One day in the middle of the winter, I'm sitting there wearing the jersey around my house because I firmly believe they should be worn all the time. I looked down at the tag and I saw it was Vernon, California. And I looked through my list, and sure enough, there was a game we needed at John Donaldson's in Vernon, California. So what did I do? I went to my stationery and I wrote a handwritten letter to this company, to the president of the company. And I said, John Donaldson is a great Negro League baseball player. You need to help me let people understand who he was. And by the way, something like February something or other, 1916, John Donaldson played in Vernon, California, and we didn't know what happened. Could you please go to the library and find this specific date? And about 3 months later, I got 3 different John Donaldson All-Stars uniforms in the mail from this guy with a box score saying, continue doing what you're doing because it will change America. And I want to help people do that, and will change how people look at baseball in our past. We can be all sad about how our great-great-grandfathers treated people and how segregation was a part of life, but it's different now. We know better. We must do better. And part of what I talk about all the time is to try and help people understand that that was then, and we're doomed to repeat it if we do not recognize what it was. This fine company sent me these uniforms, and I proudly wear them all over it, but it is absolutely one of a kind, and it's absolutely unique because no one has ever taken the time to go as far down now you can buy yourself a Homestead Grays jersey and a Kansas City Monarchs uniform, and right, all these things are done all the time. But John Donaldson's All-Stars is one that people need to know about, and people talk to me about it all the time. I still wear one of them when I play in my senior men's league games because people need to know who he was. And that's an important thing. And it was very nice. It was a gift from somebody to just be encouraging, right? It's important today that we stop telling people all the things they do wrong, right? These statistical people who say John Donaldson's stats were played against a bunch of farmers and they don't matter. Okay, but let's be encouraging of people and what they're doing, because on this journey of 20 years that I've been on, many, many, many people said, do what you're doing and continue doing it because it's going to change how people look at things. And that's an important thing to understand. Is I'd like to encourage as many people to, you never know who I'm going to be talking to next, who might be able to go out and change what we believe about the history of America. And we should do that.
Great for you. Great attitude. Great message. Great luck, man. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything talking, and I wish you the best of luck. Like you said, December 5th is another day. Hopefully that is a day, though, that brings legitimacy, let's say, to everything that you're doing, even though it already is. But you get,
I believe that.
You get what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying, right? The Hall of Fame is a huge honor for John Donaldson. He deserves that. But the Hall of Fame, induction or not, does not define who John Donaldson was. Yeah. We already know who he was. It would be a huge honor for him, but his legacy stands on its own. And if the Hall of Fame thinks that's something that they want to have a part of and understand, that is something that of course, we need to share with them. But if he makes it or not, we are now learning lessons from him on a daily basis. And that's what I want to share with people.
And you do it, and you do a very great job at it. So
thank you,
sir. You have a great night. I appreciate all your time. I appreciate all your help, and great of luck. Talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.